We hired Brad, and we hired so the lady they process of it. And also like her background, she's fantastic. She's got a big sales background. Very devout. Her dad was a Baptist minister. And we hired an administrative assistant. So we're ready to go. One for now.
There's a very wonderful theologian at the Atlantic School of Theology by the name of Dr. David Dean. Some of you may have heard of him. He just wrote a book about moral teaching. His point is that Catholic moral teaching in the past has been very much like, reading a rule book. And he said it's not like that. What it is that as we go through the Christian life, we give ourselves more and more and more to Christ, so that we put on Christ in our behavior and in our relationships. because the decisions made by this one judge were not practical, nor were they protective of vulnerable patients. So, euthanasia has been expanding since the original court decision. In 2016, legislation was passed in which the politicians tried to restrict it to situations where death was reasonably foreseeable. And why did they do that? Because they were concerned, well, people with disabilities, they euthanize just because of a disability. You see, when you euthanize somebody just because of a disability, as a society, we're saying that you don't really, your life is not really that valuable because you have a disability, so therefore we all feel bad for you, so we might as well just, if you want to die, we might as well just kill you. Whereas an able-bodied person, they say, no, we can't kill you because you're able-bodied. We did, there's something in society called ableism. Have you heard of ableism? Ableism is the sense that if you are not able-bodied, then you're not as valuable as an able-bodied person. In 2021, we did an Angus Reid survey. We sponsored an Angus Reid survey, and we found that in Ontario, I believe it was over 60% of the people who responded felt that there was a sense in society that able-bodied people were more valuable than people with disabilities. So if you're living with that, day in, day out, let's say it's a quadriplegic, after a while, you can't even internalize it. If you're constantly fighting the government to get services and support, after a while, you just give in. And in the same survey, we found that 55% of respondents said that they were concerned that persons with disabilities would choose euthanasia because they couldn't find appropriate services. So there is a real concern in the public about this. Even amongst people who believe that it should be legal, there's concern about this. So it expanded. At first it was death had to be reasonably foreseeable. The government trying to protect people with disabilities. That got challenged in Quebec in the lower court. The current federal government decided not to repeal it. And so that included persons with disabilities. You probably are aware that at one point they were trying to expand to include people with mental illness. That mental illness would be the only reason to be euthanized. And that has now been put off to 2027. But what a lot of people don't realize is this wasn't because people were concerned about people with disabilities. It became a political issue. And it was decided that it would be put off until after the next election campaign so that it wouldn't cause the government problems in terms of people reelected. The other thing that's happened is that people have, the people who provide euthanasia have decided that there are certain illnesses that are called organic illnesses. They're not mental illness. So, for instance, there was a 27-year-old young woman in Calgary who was on the autism spectrum, and she also had ADHD, and she applied for euthanasia, and she was successful in getting it. Even though you're not allowed to get paid for mental illness, they said this was an organic disability, and therefore she qualified. Her father, who she lived with, was so distraught he went to court trying to stop it. He did get a preliminary injunction, but the matter is under appeal now, and we're really skeptical that he's going to be successful. So this woman had no other health problems other than autism. I have a grandson who's on the autism spectrum. Do I have to spend the rest of my life worrying that at a low point, he's going to approach a physician and ask for me? But that's the situation in our country. You may have also seen another news article about a man who was a quadriplegic and had a chest infection. He was admitted to the emergency room in Montreal. They didn't have the proper mattress for him with his quadriplegia. He was 4 days in the emergency room because they couldn't get a bed in the hospital, a regular bed in the hospital. And as a result, he got very severe bed sores. And those bed sores, after 4 days, got to the point did so because they had lost dignity. And 35% chose MAID because they felt that they were a burden to the family. Now, I do pastoral care, and I know that there are tons of people who feel like they're a burden to the family, but we don't kill them. We bring in the family and say, how do you feel about caring for your dad or your wife or your husband? And they always say, I'm so grateful to be able to care for them. Now, other reasons here are things like no longer being able to participate in meaningful activities. But the question there is, what's meaningful? You see, if you're a disabled person who adjusts to a disability, then you can find meaning in any activity. So the point simply is that what these people need is good kind of care, which Monica will tell you is not just drugs, but it's also counseling. And what these people need is counseling and support, not lethal injection. But the sad reality is that lethal injection is easier. Now, this lady here, Madeline Lee, very brave lady, she's a psychiatrist in downtown Toronto at the University Health Network. She is responsible for the whole MAID service. She provides MAID, she and her team provide MAID for all of the patients at the University Health Network, which is the largest health network in downtown Toronto, 80 in the country. She came out last year in the Claims magazine and said something very brave. She said the current criteria do not properly protect vulnerable people. In a normal country, this would result in a royal commission. In Canada, it's like, oh well, no reaction. And so that, to me, when the MAID providers are saying that the current criteria don't protect vulnerable people, then that just makes my argument, right? There's no question that that's the problem. Oh yeah, and so that was just a point that Dad made, that there's a misconception of people choosing because of physical pain. That's not the case. Next slide. So we're getting down into some of the things that we're doing to try to combat this problem. One is a program called No Options, No Choice, where we're trying to highlight our vulnerable patients and how they're not getting properly served. You know, I did a presentation with the Hospice and Palliative Care Association of Canada, and as a group, we estimated that only 30 to 50% of Canadians get access to proper palliative care. So what happens is that as you reduce the amount of palliative care, then there are less choices for people and they're more likely to choose MAID. So what we did is we highlighted the lives of 4 vulnerable people. We had 2 who had mental health issues. Sam was a young man up there, attempted suicide in Calgary when he was 20 years old.
when I came in, somebody said, being able to wait to go to the bathroom the entire day was the price of my freedom, because I was in a regular high school in the community, and I was told if I couldn't do that, I would not be able to go to high school because there was no assistance available with something like the washroom. And so, I just had to learn how to man. When I came in, somebody just had to turn the desk around the other way so I could sit at the desk because the chairs were attacked, and I brought my own chair. So it was just, that was the only accommodation. Education was very important. It was important to our mom and my teacher in our minds from a very early age that this was a path that we need to be on, and to me it was a road to freedom. Living in the institution was always like the sword of Damocles, hanging over my head. Very afraid of that outcome. If I had to leave a nursing home at 18 years old, and I was offered MAID instead, I might very well have chosen that if I didn't see any hope for anything else happening. I went on to university, decided to learn to be a teacher. That was the beginning of the rest of my life. I was able to work at a private college that worked with adults who needed to read and write. We worked with people with disabilities, also people who were coming out of federal prisons, people who were getting off of the street, just people basically overlooked in society in many ways. That was very consistent with just my own growing belief about advocacy and recognizing people what other people might not recognize. And then from there, I was invited to work in the government and helping the government learn how to make their services more accessible to people with disabilities. One of the legacies was supporting the Ministry of Transportation in their efforts to have accessible on-route stops. Just work with them to make them more accessible. So that was really great, and I'm able to enjoy that myself as now that I'm retired. And if I'm traveling somewhere, there's always a stop. It's really nice. And I do my best, or at least put a ramp in front of it. If you stop to think about it, if a person cannot get help
document, Samaritanus Bonus, they basically indicated that euthanasia is something that's called intrinsically evil. That means in Catholic moral theology that it's something that is never permitted under any circumstances. It doesn't matter what the intention or what the circumstances. It is always and everywhere wrong to kill someone under these circumstances. And the part that I find very concerning is that many Catholics are confused about this. And many do not realize that they are in danger. If someone goes through with euthanasia, they are at risk of committing a mortal sin. Because they are doing something directly against the Ten Commandments in a very serious matter. And if they have full knowledge of what they're doing and they completely consent to it, then that would result in a mortal sin, which would separate them from God and possibly forever. So it's a very, very serious, if we have members of our family who are considering this, the first thing we need to ask is, why do you feel you need to die? What is the suffering that you're experiencing? And how can I come alongside to help you, to support you in this? But if someone really has their decision made up, then you need to share with them, or call in a priest to share with them, the risk they're putting their soul at. And this is so serious that the church has said, and this is not just our diocese, but the universal church, that if someone has set a date for me, and they ask for the last rites, the priest is not allowed to give it to them. And the reason for that is that if you have the intention of committing a serious sin, of turning your back on God, of saying to God, this life you've given me, I no longer want it. So take it back. It's such a severe rejection of God that the church is saying, we can't give you the anointing of sin. So I think we need to that really is something that we really need to think about. Next slide. So we go back to the purpose of life again, of conforming our lives to Christ. Of every choice that we make, every decision we make is to glorify God, to become more and more like Jesus. I hope you can see that the decision to end your life by euthanasia does not conform yourself to Christ. I can't imagine Jesus doing it. I can't imagine him wanting us to do it. Instead, he suffered on the cross and did that, and the result was salvation for the world. So also, we can offer up our sufferings. Remember, we're not talking about physical suffering now, because that should be dealt with by palliative care. But we can offer up our existential sufferings and the difficulties that we have, and the grief that we experience in difficult times like this. We can offer that up to God. I experienced that with my own father, who was in palliative care for 2 years. And thanks be to God, didn't experience any pain, even though he had a large cancerous want the government to intervene. And the bishop himself has written to the Minister of Health to ask for a meeting. As of yet, we haven't been given one. We understand that there's some problem around the minister meeting with Christian groups and concern that this might look bad. So I hope you understand what's going on here. Like a beleaguered minority is being discriminated against. What will happen is that Catholics, Christians, Muslims, Jews will not be able to practice medicine anymore because they can't get on the bandwagon for MAID. And I hope you understand how serious it is. I've looked at every other province in Canada, and I have met with ministers of health in almost every province. I met with the premier of Brunswick. This is the only province where I haven't been able to meet with the minister of health. So we have a problem here in Nova Scotia. There's no other college in Canada that is as strict as this college. The only way we can explain it is that they are ideologically in support of euthanasia. And they are trying to exclude doctors who are opposed to it. That's the only conclusion we can come to. And the only way this can change is if Christians in Nova Scotia stand up and say no. 30 doctors have said no. Well, we need you to support them. Because they can easily be brushed aside. But politicians cannot brush aside, thousands of people who say this is wrong. So we've passed out letters tonight. I'm hoping that you will sign one and leave it with us when we go out. I'm hoping also that you might be willing to take some and give them to your friends and get them to sign them. I preached at 2 different parishes, and during that time we had 500 letters. And on the electronic campaign, if you're really tech savvy, you can just take your phone and use the square there and automatically come to the website. You go to the website, it takes 2 minutes to send in an email to your MLA list. You just type in your postal code and you can just send it directly to your MLA. Or you can sign a paper copy because you go to the Minister of Health and other officials of the British government. But I think that hopefully, I have had a challenge over the last several years. I go all across Canada explaining about this problem. When I speak to Christians, the response I normally get is complete shock. This is happening. You certainly don't get it from me, but everything I've said, I don't say anything unless I have personal experience of it, and it's true. So I beg you, first of all, pray for us. To help, particularly the 30 doctors, have the strength to be able to stand up. And then I ask you also to consider signing a letter and helping us with this project. Thanks so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Deacon Larry. Part of this evening is a chance to engage in conversation, so we'll take a few minutes here. If anyone has a question, I can just come to you and hold the mic. And before I do that, a few minutes ago, a friend of mine who I just want to introduce, Reverend David McGinley, has arrived here. David recently retired as a chaplain on the palliative care ward. So Monica, you know him very, very well. David, maybe after Monica speaks, you might be able to give a little rejoinder since we're so happy you're here. I'll be having a conversation, the parish has a podcast, I'll be having a conversation with David on this topic in a couple of weeks, which I'm looking forward to as well. So, right now, questions on the first part of our presentation.
2 questions, Larry. First of all, has the province outlawed or banned conscientious objector on behalf of the doctors?
The decision has come from the College of Physicians and Surgeons, which is a regulatory body. It's a creature of the legislature. It was created by legislation, but they operate at arm's length from government. And what they've said is that doctors must provide an effective referral. Now, our doctors cannot do that. So if a patient comes to one of our doctors. We are okay coming to, you know, you can go to Nova Scotia Health, and they have a 1-800 line, which you can get on the website, you can contact them that way. We're okay with that, but we cannot write a letter to these other doctors saying we want our patient to be seen. We find that to be immoral. It's something we just can't do. It makes us a participant in the actual act of euthanasia. We feel that death is evil. That we don't want our patients to die, so we can't recommend that another doctor talk to them about it. So it's the referral that is in question right now. It's the debate.
So the health department is saying you must refer. You cannot say, I'm not going to refer, or my conscience prevents me from doing this.
That's right. So the college itself has the power to regulate medicine, so they can investigate a doctor, they can discipline a doctor, they can take the doctor's license if the doctor refuses. And we already have an example of one doctor in Scotia who's already been disciplined because of this. So at a time that we're actually, we're like 150,000 Nova Scotians don't have a doctor. And these people at the college are so ideologically bent that they're going to chase 30 doctors out of Nova Scotia. That'll just give you an idea of what we're doing.
Thank you. Go ahead. Second question. Just a sec. Lloyd?
About the Alberta program. Your letter says that Alberta has developed an innovative approach. What's innovative about their approach?
In Alberta, they have a nurse practitioners hired, so that when the patient expresses interest in MAID, the first person they talk to is not an assessor, it's the nurse practitioner, who has the power to refer them to any alternative service, so that rather than being directed towards MAID, they come to the nurse practitioner, and she or he can directly refer them for palliative care. They can directly refer them for other tests. They do have the capacity to refer them for an assessment. But we feel that it's a fairer way, because in Ontario, for instance, and in Nova Scotia, if you call into the MAID line, then the first person you get set up with an assessor. And what often happens is that once you make that decision, you're locked in to that approach. And they say it's like a train going down the tracks. It's very difficult to change that. Where we feel that the first person you talk to should be someone who can listen to your problems, identify what issues there are, and then have that person know what services are available and actually link you into those services. So in Alberta, their nurse practitioners there actually have arrangements with various services so they get people in faster.
Go ahead. Just a sec. We've got more questions, okay? There's other people with questions.
I heard a program on CBC radio not that long ago, and it was on this topic of MAID. And one of the people speaking said that two criteria that qualify an individual for MAID are age of 80 or over and frailty. So basically anybody who's an octogenarian who's frail qualifies. Is that the case across Canada, or are there different different criteria used from province to province or territory to territory?
No, the actual criteria, as I said, were developed by one judge in BC, and those were incorporated into the criminal code. But there was a case in Ontario, it was the AD case, where they determined that a grievous and irremediable illness could be age. So age itself would qualify. So, in case the other problem in the system in Canada is that the criminal code is set up so that the doctor just has to be of the opinion that the criteria are met. So it's totally in the mind of the doctor. And we know that most, like in Ontario, for instance, only like 1% of all doctors in Ontario either assess or provide MAID. see, the medical profession in general doesn't want to have anything to do with it because they know that vulnerable patients will end up dying. So what happens is that the people doing MAID are all members of dying community who believe that euthanasia should be on demand. So if the doctor only has to be of a subjective opinion that the criteria are met, then it's like it's like in my opinion, it's open season. And for instance, things like competency. The level of competency required is no different than the level required to approve any medical procedure. So a person can be, we've had situations, this was a situation where the woman was the mother of the physician. The physician had been dealing with the mother's gerontologist who said the patient was incompetent. Two MAID assessors came in just over a week later and determined that in their opinion, the patient was competent. And the doctor found out about it when she was on the ferry from Nanaimo to the mainland, and they told her, your mother will be dying from MAID tomorrow morning at 10:30. Now, this woman found out that she would have an hour and a half to say goodbye to her mother. So that's the sort of things that are going on.
I'm wondering who's pushing this on us? Who's pushing this on us? What people?
There's, in Nova Scotia, there are 4 prominent people who, how many people here know Sister Nula Kenny? You know Sister Nula? I said to Sister Nula one time, I said, Sister Nula, I think there's only about 12 people in Canada that are pushing this. She looked at me, she got that look in her eye, she looked like she was going to burst a vein in her neck. She went, try 5. And I call the 4 horses of the apocalypse are here in Nova Scotia. Jocelyn Downey, who is cross-appointed in law school and medical school. Dr. Gus Grant, who's the registrar at Nova Scotia College. I can never remember his name, there's this child psychiatrist at the IWK who is very prominent in saying children should get paid and there should be paid for people with psychiatric illness. And then a 4th person. But surprisingly, the leaders in Canada, most of them are right here in Nova Scotia. So there's like five, Sister Nula's pretty close. There's like 5 or 6 people who are driving this. And what's happening is that Canadians are so weak and unwilling to fight about anything that they just ignore it. And this group will, I kid you not, they'll continue to push and push and push and push until it euthanasia on demand. And all of you, when you come to end of life, or even before, or if you have family members who are vulnerable, you will find, much to your chagrin, that they'll be coming to you saying, Dad or Mom or daughter or son, next week I'm dying by euthanasia. And you'll be able to say to them,
We'll take another question from Carolyn, and then we'll have time for one more before we move on to Monica.
Just in regards to the mental health issue around it, I'm wondering if I was someone who had guardianship over an adult who didn't have capacity, could I apply for it on their behalf? Yet? Or is that in the works?
well, Carolyn, the thing that worries me is the college that had sent to Quebec came to the federal committee, and they recommended that children under the age of 1 should be able to be euthanized. So you know how things are in Canada. Now, the college that had sent to Quebec is very powerful in Quebec. If they can sell that to the Quebec government has the attitude that Ottawa has no jurisdiction. So, like, I'm at the point where
Okay, this will be our last question for now before we move on to Monica, and then we'll have more questions after that.
Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this because I will have difficulty signing this letter the way it's written. And the biggest difficulty that I have with it is that you refer to simple solutions across Canada, and yet this letter is not solution focused. You know, I would want more information on what solutions have been found to get us, you know, around this dilemma. And I couldn't sign this letter because of that.
Okay, if I can tell you the two solutions that we've done.
I don't think it's just to me or the few people that are here that need that. The issue for me is presentation. And I couldn't sign a letter like this because of that.
I just want to take a minute and explain the solutions that we have come up with. In 7 jurisdictions, they basically said that it's sufficient for the physician to provide information on how the patient can access it, and access to MAID is provided without referral. In Ontario, where they do have a policy of effective referral, we had extensive discussions with them the last 4 years, where the Ministry of Health participated along with the college, and we were able to come to an agreement where they maintain the language effective referral, but they say that if the physician provides information about how the patient can access the service, and the physician also assists the patient if they need assistance, then that would be sufficient. So it's like there's 8 other jurisdictions where it's all written out in the policy, and the college is refusing even to meet with us to discuss it. So that's the problem we're facing.
Well, perhaps if there was a presentation that was sent that outlines where how this has been dealt with in other jurisdictions, it might lead to a discussion.
Yes, agreed, possible.
Okay, thank you, Deacon Larry, very much. Thank you for your questions and comments. I'm now going to ask Monica. Now, Monica, do you still want to go to the... You can do it up here? Okay, great. It's all yours.
Thanks everybody for coming. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. And those who know me know how much I enjoy standing up here and doing this. So I've been a healthcare nurse for 27 years. doesn't mean that your care provider has given up. It just means that you need some help in other areas. So palliative care is active care that you receive along with your other treatments. Lots of times you see patients that are going through chemotherapy or radiation therapy just as a help to get through some symptoms or some things that are happening that maybe the cancer doctors aren't as familiar with or comfortable with. It focuses on helping you to live as fully as possible for whatever time you have left.
We are so grateful to have Monica right in our community. This is not just something she does for work. This flows out of a sense of calling for her. And so if you or someone you know is interested in a conversation about palliative care, it'd be a pleasure to connect you to Monica.
Lots of times when I go in to meet a patient and I go with a physician, I'd be like, oh, I know that person. And they're like, how do you know that person? I know that person from my church. I know that person from my church. I know that person from my community. I know that person from my church. I kind of lost track of the number of parishioners that I followed in my career.
Any questions for Monica on what palliative care is or isn't? Any questions for Monica? All right, you're off to, oh, here's one, Ainsley.
I guess as long as we're talking about resources, do we have enough resources for palliative care? If we want to kind of counter the other proposal, the other options, do we have?
HRM is probably understaffed with regard to palliative resources according to population compared to other areas in the province and other areas of the country. So no, the answer is we don't.
I just wanted to mention that one of our doctors recently got seconded from Antigonish to go down to Yarmouth, and he's handling the whole Tri-County area. One guy, yeah.
That traditionally has been a one-physician territory. But even just with the population of HRM and our 10 physicians, it's still not adequate numbers. Our 12 community nurses follow up to 20 to 25 patients at any one time, which is still only about 250, 300 patients if you do math. And referrals just they don't stop.
So is palliative care really accessible to everybody?
Say it again.
Is palliative care accessible to everybody then? That needs it.
Maybe not, but with training of physicians, family physicians, and GPs and nurse practitioners that are able to provide a palliative approach to care, like not everybody needs to see a specialist, but we do need to have all physicians comfortable with palliative care and prescribing medications and methods of treatments.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you very, very much. Now, there's not a lot of people, after sitting here for an hour and a half, there's not a lot of people I would feel comfortable handing the mic off to for a minute, but I know you're going to love listening to Reverend David McGinley, who, as I mentioned, recently retired as a chaplain on the palliative care ward. David, come on up, and perhaps you've heard the tenor of the conversation tonight. Maybe you can respond to it. And there's one question that I have for you that comes up for me a lot. When we talk about the Catholic response to euthanasia, to medical assistance in dying, in fact, I got this question today after Mass. So I've heard, this is how the question went this morning, and it's framed in different ways, but it gets to this basic point. I've heard you say a lot how good it was for you to take care of your grandmother when she was dying, or your mother when she was dying. I heard that it was good for you, but how was it for the other person? Shouldn't we just have allowed them to elect euthanasia if they want to? Why is that something that we should even hoist on someone else? Is that a good starting point? Yeah?
6'8". I'm a high priest.
I'm demonstrating my respect for you. I was insult experts. That's how I built my empire. I want you to tell me why I shouldn't have it. What's the spirit? You're a spiritual expert. What am I missing with me? I said, okay, you want it straight. He slammed his fist on the bed and he said, look, what's the point in me suffering here while my daughters sit there and watch me? It's pointless. Where's the meaning in this? I said, okay. Can you imagine that you're done teaching your daughters the ultimate lessons a parent could ever impart? How to deepen their humanity, how to not abandon suffering in any respect, how to be fully present in the moment, how to be awake to the ordinary things, how to say the four important things as you die in many different ways, such as thank you, and I love you, and I forgive you, and goodbye. How to sit in silence and not run away, how to work with your thoughts and the difficult emotions, how to be comfortable with ambiguity and not knowing, how to give yourself to the mystery that brought you into this world and is wired to take you out of it. Can you allow your children to anoint your body with their tears while you lie unconscious in liminal realms that are beyond our comprehension? And can you give them the opportunity to witness the most beautiful and transcendent state of consciousness, which is incredibly common to people as they die? Almost 90% of people exhibit near-death awareness at the end of life. They see their welcoming party. They are filled with peace. The architecture of the room changes. They feel the peace of God. They speak of it cryptically, but sometimes directly, able to share it with their family members present. They're able to rise from states of unconsciousness to consciousness and say, it's so beautiful. Don't you see that? It's universal across cultures, language, age, education, belief system, periods in history, geography. It is endemic to the human journey. Can you give yourself to that mystery? And he said, I wish I had asked you the question. I've been a chaplain for over 25 years for working with the I retired as a MAID. I can't function in a system that is so impoverished and bullheaded. Should we give the person the choice? When a person is distressed, I'm not going to take up a lot of time, you probably covered this. When a person is stressed, let alone when they're facing the end of life, they have a cognitive constriction. So they're unable to consider the alternatives. He was unable to consider what I had laid on his altar to the self. And you need a guide at the end of life to help you deepen your humanity and amplify your love through your vulnerability and your surrender to the process. You're not giving up, you're giving yourself to a wisdom that's wired into you from the beginning, and your ideal is to receive excellent palliative care and to make sure the trip has as little turbulence as possible. Stay ahead of the pain, don't chase it. Ask your doctor the hard question: how will I die from this? How will it affect my metabolism, my systems? What can we do to mitigate that? The meaning in suffering is discovered only as we give ourselves to it as a functional process, and I'm going to get technical. A functional process that deconstructs the ego's identity in the reverse order that it formed as a calibration to the final state of human development, which is transcendence. Now I can roll that off because I just today finished final edits on my book about the spiritual dimensions of medical assistance in I'm just grateful for it. I have had my head down and doing the work of palliative care so much, and then I've been grinding away at this work for 5 years. I don't know the organizations out there, so I'd like a conversation with you to go and send that and partner with you. Because there'll be tours across Canada and Europe, New Zealand, and Australia and such. So,
I've got a couple of questions here. I'll run over just so folks can hear you. Where? Go ahead.
Yeah, where's your book going to be available for purchase?
Oh, it'll be available at any bookstore or buy on Amazon. Try to support your local bookstore. But it'll be out in the summer. I have to figure out the cover design.
One of the things that I find sad is that you say existential suffering is a secular term for spiritual. And insofar as the medical care system has tried to exist, or it wants to exist more apart from God, or keeping God out of the medical care system, that only creates the existential angst that people are, like the MAID is a symptom of a spiritual problem. I think that's what you're saying too.
Yes, and spiritual issues, meaning, purpose, identity, belonging, safety, existential framework, that matter in the world, those rise to the surface like cream on good latte in cappuccino. It rises to the surface as the end of life approaches. But secular society just wants to blow the foam off the cup when it contains so much grace. When you pain, suffering equals pain times resistance. So as you resist the suffering process by rallying and forcing your agenda upon it, you increase your existential distress. But as you give yourself to the suffering through community and good palliative care and a gradual, if negotiated surrender of self, what happens is it gets transformed into grace. More belonging, deeper sense of identity, more love, deeper humanity.
Yeah.
You described something about ego, perhaps, again. Okay, this will be thick, okay? All right. The personal identity or ego identity is formed through life through 4 contractions of consciousness away from the ground of being. That's a secular term. I keep secular terms in my book because that's the audience of language. So the ground of being we call God. When you're born into the world, you emerge from an environment in which you were one with the womb. There was no personal self. Now you're suddenly in an environment, so that causes a split away from the ground of being, a contraction of consciousness. The second contraction happens when you realize there's living, non-living, moving, and static in the environment. So you're forming what's technically called object relations. And that's a contraction of differentiation of being. We're going to increasing sense of separation away from unity. Third contraction is where you realize you're a mind and a body. So that's a sever, which causes a split between spiritual and physical. And then the fourth contraction is away from any information experiences that do not support the ego's developing identity or put into the warehouse of the subconscious, and we just keep piling stuff in there. So, challenge and crisis trigger ego defense mechanisms for self-preservation. It wants to preserve its integrity. And nothing challenges the integrity of the ego's identity like that. But you've been practicing ego crisis you faced, from the little ones at the early age when you lost your teddy bear and you wailed like the world was coming to an end in the grocery store, to when you went through a change in your family, or you lost your job, or you lost your girlfriend, or you lost your wife, and you lose your health, and you lose your life. That which preserves the integrity of the eagle goes into the eagle's framework and the persona. And we function on that through most of life. So dying is calibrated to deconstruct that in the reverse form. So the severing from the subconscious material is healed because dying calls on you to forgive and release and let go and integrate what is in the subconscious. You want to finish the unfinished love stories. And then the second contraction, or unity of mind and body, I'm afraid that happens through being in pain. Nothing connects the mind and the body to unity like pain does. So that it's asking for the duration of the treatment. And frailty at the end of life, that does it too. Right? Back, head, memory. Then the severing between the objects in the world and the personal identity, that is healed after a wilderness period of despair where you're working with the frailty and negotiating with it. And that will arrive at a place of release and letting go of who and what you were in the world and your objects in the job. When you do that with grace, there's actually a sense of freedom, lightness, and connection to everything, even to nature and reality. And then the final healing, you are one with the environment through near-death awareness, which comes up on almost everyone. And it's witnessed sometimes momentarily by nurses, by family members, but rarely by doctors who are not at the bedside for hours on end, like chaplains, nurses, and family. And that's near-death awareness, ecstasy, wonder, how you are one with the environment and the ground of being, just before your transformation. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much, David. As I mentioned, I'm going to be having a conversation on our parish podcast with David in the next couple of weeks, and I know we're all already excited about your book. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And we'll close with Ronnie as our parish continues to deal with this topic. We'll close with Ronnie and something we're offering here in the parish.
Thanks. I'm glad that David lowered the microphone because I'm about 9. People have friends in all places, that's me. So I, just this year, I sort of, over the last few years, have been realizing that we have a very large catechetical gap in our Christian formation. So that's a large educational gap. In that this year I turned 40, so I'm still fairly young. I counted it out. I'm the fourth oldest person in this room. There's only 3 people younger than me. And never once in my Christian formation, theological studies and all those sorts of things, have I ever really learned about the depth of the spiritual nature of the dying process. Only this year or last year was I faced with it for the first time as I got to know someone many of you know, John Underhill, who was approaching death. It has been, I can't thank God enough for getting to know him in the little ways that I have and get to see that witness of what it is for a Christian person to approach death in a really holy and deeply spiritual way. And that's at the age of 40. And that's a terrible circumstance that I haven't had that experience or been educated or formed in that. So I fully understand that when we get to that process of dying, that if we are unformed around the dying process as Christians, that euthanasia can seem for some like a viable option because we've never been educated about the deep sacramentality of that. So we're going to be running a program here. I have to apologize, but I wasn't aware that we had another program that we have access to, the Living with Christ program. But Living with Christ, dying with hope, right? Dying with Christ, living with hope. There we go. But I plan to run starting next week. So the dates of this, it's called Eternal Rest. Let me pull out my phone here so I get it right. The dates are May 4th and 11th. Those are 2 Saturday mornings. Eternal Rest is a program that is
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Deacon Larry. Thank you, Monica. And thank you, Reverend David McGinley, for being here and all of your contributions tonight. Thank you, every one of you, for being here. If you want to get in touch with any of our speakers tonight, please get in touch with the office or with me. I can point you in the right direction, and let us care for one another. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. Thanks be to God.